Hey guys, welcome back. My name's Melissa if you're new here. For today's video, we are going to be taking care of my Monstera Albos. As you could see from the beginning, I actually have 3 of them. I have had one for, I would say, a little over 2 years, closer to 2.5. Well, no, it's been over 2 years. And the other 2 I got the year after. So I've had the other 2 probably for like a year, going on a year and a half, and all 3 of them started from propagations. One was a single unrooted cutting, and the other 2, they had a little bit of roots, but I still had to finish rooting them, and so one started off as a 3-leaf prop, and the other one started off as a 2-leaf prop. I have had plenty of experience with Monstera Albos. I've actually recently, I would say a few months ago, cut and propagated a top cut off of one of mine to do for a giveaway. And so I have rooted these successfully and I have propagated these successfully, and I will give you my care tips on them as well. I haven't actually filmed in like a week or so because I've been getting over a cold, so you can kind of still hear it in my voice. So I'm gonna try and make it through this video. And we are on my floor today in my plant room. I didn't feel like dragging that table out. And I have everything that I need down here. I'm probably gonna give you guys some different angles so you can see what I'm doing a little bit more up close. And I'll kind of tell you my plan and what I think I am going to do with these. I have all my supplies here on the floor that you can't really see. I have soil mix, I have my shears, I have bamboo stake, plant Velcro, repotting supplies, all of that. Now, 2 of them do need a repot, and it's mostly because roots have escaped and they're not necessarily overly root bound, but I am going to be slightly upsizing them. And the other one I repotted not too long ago, and the only thing I'm going to do with that one is just change out the stake to a longer one. I might end up propagating one of these, I'm not sure. I kind of have 2 vines going on 2 of the plants, and I don't know if I want to keep them growing like that. And if you have any questions about Monstera Albo, definitely let me know. It honestly was my first expensive plant purchase, and I just fell in love with Monstera Albo a long time ago. I just dreamed to have and own this plant, and now that I have 3 of them, I honestly am just so lucky. I did pay for these myself, and it was a wishlist plant at the time, and so I didn't really, okay, let me backtrack. I didn't tell you why I have all 3. This is the one that I ended up propagating from a single leaf, and it now has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 leaves since that original leaf died. That original leaf died actually in April of this year, and it took like a year and a half for this plant to finally grow, and that was the main reason I ended up getting the other Monstera Albos. I was kind of addicted to plant purges on Facebook back in the day. I honestly just joined them and just, I don't know, I was working as a nurse at that time. I was stressed, and plants just brought me so much happiness, and I loved Monstera Albo, and this one didn't grow for the longest time, and I really wanted a growing Monstera Albo. And I actually got all these from the same seller, and I purchased the second one, which is, I'm trying to think which one was the second one. I don't remember which one of these I got next. So this one was a 3-leaf prop originally, and look at how many leaves it has now. It actually has 2 vines growing, and I don't know if I want to cut and propagate this and have 2 separate plants growing. I'm not sure, but yes, this one has kind of some half moon leaves growing too, which is a dream. I just think this kind of variation on an albo is what I wish to have. Actually, this one was the one that I got next, I remember. So this one here, I actually chopped this one not that long ago, and so from the chop it produced 2 nodes to activate, so I have 2 separate vines growing now. And the reason that I cut this one was to do a giveaway, and this one actually, these are the 2 original leaves on the plant, these bottom 2, and this one is yellowing slightly, and I think I actually might cut these off, these bottom 2 leaves, and I don't know, and just kind of repot this one. This one severely needs like a readjusting in the pot with the roots. And I'm gonna stake all these guys, get them growing up. These guys have new leaves pushing out as well. So this one I got second because it was a 2-leaf prop. And again, I got this because my original one didn't grow for the longest time. And I just really wanted a growing Monstera Albo. So that's why I got this one. And it was a prop, so I had to root it, but it actually started growing quicker than expected. It didn't take any time at all for that to start growing after I rooted it and everything. And so then I think I got this one. This was a 3-leaf prop and it had very white leaves. I think I was obsessed with the more white leaves because when I got these ones, they didn't have a lot of white and I wanted an Albo with a lot of white. So I kind of splurged again and got like a 3-leaf prop that had a ton of white. Some of these bottom leaves were the original leaves here. And it's actually growing quite a bit of like cool, like green leaves now, and it started off mostly white. So it is interesting how this one is growing. This one is my original one. This one has beautiful green and white. I love this one, of course, and I love the coloring on this one. And this one kind of has some minty leaves. The cutting that I sold, I'll have to put a picture of it. Well, I didn't sell it, I did it for a giveaway. It had beautiful color variegation. So I love all of them, they're all different. This one is 1 vine, my original one. So the ones that's growing 2 vines, I definitely want to cut this one, I feel like. And I don't know, I might just create a 4th plant with it, we'll see. But I'm not currently selling any cuttings. If I do in my future, I will definitely let you guys know, but I just love them, they're my plants, and I just want to have big, beautiful growing Monstera Albos in my collection. I just want them to grow tall and big and beautiful. So I don't really want to like cut and propagate to sell per se, you know, but we'll see. I might end up chopping this one in half, and then that 4th plant that I make, I may end up using one as like for selling purposes. Maybe, we'll see. Sorry if I have to like stop and clear my throat. I'm trying not to overly talk for this video because of my voice, so bear with me. Someone told me they didn't care for all the cat footage in my videos, and I'm sorry, it's kind of out of my control. I can't really force them out. If I close my door while I'm in here, they scratch at it wanting in, so then you can hear them scratching. So I can't really leave my door closed. I don't know, they just like to be where I'm at, so sometimes they're just gonna be in my videos. So yeah, that's kind of the plan. I have 3 of them, and I think I'm gonna do this one first because this one I repotted not too long ago, and I just need to replace the stake because it's growing above the stake and it's not as secured to it. So I have these bamboo ones. I'm gonna cut them in half so they're not super long, and then I'm just gonna put a bamboo stake in this one to support it, and then we'll get to repotting. And I'm gonna upsize them to these pots. They're in 6-inch pots already, and again, I think roots have just escaped out the holes. They're not really overly root bound, so I don't want to go up too large. This is going to give them a little extra room, and I don't have any bigger pots, and I don't want to go up to an 8-inch for these. They're not ready for that. So, and I don't really want to use these clear pots, but it's all that I have, so I'm going to have to use these ones. So, and I'm not gonna get rid of the soil in these at all either because the soil is still good. I honestly repotted these earlier this year, and I made extra drain holes in the nursery pot. I honestly am not gonna disturb them too much, minus the one that I might cut, which is this one over here. I'm just going to like put them in a new pot, refill around, and I'm not gonna add any more fertilizer today because I added fertilizer a couple weeks ago into all my plants to get them through the winter, and then in the spring I will fertilize everyone again. I use slow release Osmocote for all my plants now, and it's good for 4 to 6 months, and it's just more convenient for me. I just prefer slow release fertilizer. I will kind of bend you guys down here. We will get to staking this one first, and then we'll get to the other ones. And if you guys are just wanting to know the Monstera Albo care, I will put the care at the end of this video. I'll make a chapter, so if you just want to skip to the care part, I will highlight on some care towards the end, but this first is just going to be like repotting and taking care of these guys. Okay, so this is my original one that you can see here, and this is the one again that I repotted not too long ago. So the only thing I am going to do is get this one restaked better. I use plant Velcro to attach the stake to the vine. And the reason I don't use moss poles is because I have realized with the aerial roots on a Monstera here, they're just gonna grow long and wild and crazy, so they're not really benefiting from a moss pole. I'm gonna cut this in half. Because I get asked that sometimes about using a pole, and it's just not necessary. As long as you have and provide climbing support for them, they will do just fine. So when I add stakes into my Monsteras, I don't worry about potentially squishing roots. You know, I just kind of shimmy it down in there and the soil moves out of the way. All right, so this bamboo is going to help support this a little bit better. So we are going to secure it down here and then at the top. And stakes will be easy to switch out too. You can always buy taller size stakes. And it's not like the aerial roots are really growing into the stake. In Monsteras, even though like all of my Monstera Albos are small form, I don't think I've seen a large form Monstera Albo. So they're not going to get overly like huge with their leaves. They can get big, but with the vine and the aerial roots, I just don't see like a moss pole being necessary. Their roots don't grow into a pole like a normal plant would on a pole, you know, and the leaves are going to size up regardless of a pole. All right, so she is more secure and she has more room to grow. And so that's all I was going to do with that one. Okay, so this one here, I'm trying to decide what I want to do with this one. So this is the one that I propagated, and I think I'm going to leave this one with 2 vines growing up. I just don't like, these are the 2 original leaves, and I know I should leave them, you know, because they're still providing energy for the plant, but they both are yellowing a bit, and I don't know. I kind of don't like how they're growing, so I might get rid of them and then just leave me with this top half, which is beautiful, and get rid of these bottom 2. I mean, they're just leaves, right? It'll be okay. Where I had chopped before, there's not really a place to cut because it's one vine. That is where I had chopped, and it shot out 2 nodes. So it is just one vine in here growing. So there's not really a place for me to cut again. If I cut under here, it's still gonna have like 2 nodes growing. So I think I'm just gonna let this grow up, like just have 2 nodes growing up. Look at those like crazy roots. I'm not gonna disturb the root system at all. I'm just gonna slightly like chuck into a bigger pot. And I have a little bit of soul soils left. My other mix is out in the garage and I really don't feel like going out there. So we are just going to use what we have here. I sort of wished I didn't put these side holes in here. Okay. So I wouldn't really consider this root bound at all. So I'm just plopping him right down in here. I don't really want to disturb him. And then I'm just going to backfill. All right, let me add the other half of this one stake in here. Add it to the back. And so since this has 2 vines growing, I just have to be mindful that I'll probably have to support the side, or I might end up adding another stake in the back of this one. But I think for now, I'm just going to leave the one Just trying to decide if I want to chop these bottom leaves. I'm honestly not really loving them. All right, you guys, I'm getting rid of the bottom leaves. Do not get mad at me. If you disagree, that is okay. I mean, they were yellowing and going anyway, so I just think that looks a lot better. And so that's how I Velcroed the 2 vines to the stake, and then I'll continue to Velcro as the plant climbs. And that's what that one looks like from the front. And I might just take my water bottle and just moisten a little bit just to kind of blend the old soil in with the new. But I'm not really gonna give a big drink because I just watered the plant, you know, so the soil is still wet. And again, I'm not adding any more fertilizer because there's plenty from when I just added some in recently, and I didn't go up that large, so it's not really gonna make too big of a difference. So looks a lot better, and yes, I am much happier with this one. All right, this is the last one, which I'm debating on if I should cut or not. Okay, this is one of the original leaves. Do not get mad at me again, but I am chopping that. Don't get mad at me. Because my goal was to cut it at the base in the soil where each chunk has its own root system. So I'm not technically propagating. I'm like kind of dividing in a way, if that makes sense. Let me uncover this. I'm gonna have to undo the root system to see what it looks like under the soil. Yeah, so this chunk is 2 separate nodes growing. This vine, I'm not sure if you can make out the vine here in the center. So I'm basically just going to chop it in half. So there's basically 2 nodes growing. There's this node growing, and there's this node here growing. So I'm basically just going to take my scissors and cut right here on that vine, and I'll just separate the 2 root balls, and I'll have 2 separate plants. So I'm just going to cut on the vine in 3, 2, 1. All right, and here is our 2 separately rooted plants. So this one has the larger root system, and this one is smaller. So I think I have a smaller pot that I can use for that one. I did pull a little bit of roots off trying to separate those, but it'll be okay. It has enough root system that it'll be fine. So the bigger system is going in the bigger pot, and the smaller root system is going in the smaller pot. I'm going to share some of the mix that we just used that was in the pot, and then I'm just going to backfill with soils. And again, there's plenty of fertilizer in here. I'm not going to add any new fertilizer until spring. Here, and then some of that soil. Just going to plop this one down in here. I think the biggest thing with this chunky mix is just making sure you fill in the air gaps. Okay, we are gonna take our other stake and cut this in half. All right, I got this cut in half, and again, I'm just gonna put it down at the back here. Shimmy it down in here. Look, that one looks so much better. It's crazy that I just created a whole new plant. Yeah, this one I'll have to make sure I give some extra water to. And I'll show you what these guys look like here at the end. All right, and so this is the other original leaf. This leaf has been bugging me for the longest time, this one original leaf, so that one is going as well. And again, the only reason I'm keeping this soil is because it's not old. Because I had repotted these earlier in the spring when I had first moved in here. So I'm not going to get rid of like soil that's, you know, still good. There's no need to really waste it. Now, if this plant had been in the soil for like over a year, pushing on 2 years, then I would probably just chuck it and start over with, you know, fresh soil. And the sound isn't squishing roots that you hear, it's the sound of this chunky mixture, the perlite and everything. All right, and where did that stake go? I might use the clear one in here for now because it's not super tall yet. Yeah, we'll do that. Figured I would just go ahead and take care of these because I had some requests on Albo plants and they'll be like raring to go for the spring season. I won't have to mess with them or repot them. Just continue to stake the vine as it climbs. And some of these will straighten back out a little bit. The way they were positioned in the pot, like before, they're kind of downward, but they will like turn up more towards the light. All right, I am going to pan back out, show you guys all the plants, and then I'll kind of go over more about my care with these. Just them to give you a close-up. So again, like they'll face up towards the light. And so I gave them a little bit of water with some Superthrive. And so this one fit into this nursery pot really well. And I used the acrylic stake for that. So the vine that I cut from that is this one. And I use the bamboo stake and I will continue to support as it climbs. I gave this one a little bit of water as well. This one is the one that appears to be the most full because it has 2 vines growing because I had chopped it here and the 2 nodes that are growing up. So that is that one. And again, my original one here, this is my, I think the one that I love the most, of course, and then I just switched the stake out to a bamboo one. So now I'll just touch on my care with these guys just to give you an insight on what I do, and if you have issues with your Albo or you're just not sure what you're doing wrong or kind of how to improve your care, I'll just kind of tell you what I do with mine and hopefully it can help yours. So I'll just touch on light. So you guys know where my aria is, if you can see it up in that corner right there. So they all are in front of this window. This window is a south facing window, so it gets a good amount of light on days like today where it's pretty cloudy and, you know, overcast. There's not a lot of sun coming in, so the light is extremely low compared to what it is on a sunny day. But for the most part, when it is sunny, a lot of that sun actually comes in through the window. They're not even a foot back and they get direct sun on their leaves. So a lot of the sun rays do hit the plant and they tolerate it just fine. I haven't experienced any like sunburn, anything like that. So light is number one with these guys. Monstera Albos, they have less chlorophyll in the white part of their leaves. So if they're not getting enough light, they're going to brown more easily. They're not going to grow as well, and they could not give you as much variegation possibly. So the number one most important thing to do with these guys is to give them lots of light. If you have a west window or a south window, preferably I would get them honestly like right up in that window. or a foot back, no more. And that's going to be the best light. Depending on your window, of course, you know, if you have an overhang or if it's blocked or if there is an obstruction in front of that window outside, then it's not going to be as much light. But if you can see the sun rays coming in and they are landing on your plant, then ideally it is going to be good enough for them. Just make sure it's a south or west window preferably. Now, if you don't have a west or south window, I would get these guys under a grow light. And the most important thing with a grow light is making sure that it's no more than like a foot or two away from them, because any further away, the less foot candles they're going to receive. They're not going to grow as well, and you may notice more browning. So especially during the colder months like fall, winter, they're really going to need that light. So if you don't have a grow light for them, I honestly would recommend investing in one. There's lots of options out there. There's grow light bulbs, there's strip lights. I have lots that I use that I can link down below, but whatever your preference is for lights, kind that you can screw into a lamp, anything, just as long as they're under a grow light and they're about a foot away, that is going to be like ideal if you don't have like good natural light. Now, and I would say the next best thing to do for your albo is to give it some kind of climbing support. Without support, they're going to flop over, they're going to not grow mature leaves. You can use a pole. It's honestly not ideal for me and my preference because the aerial roots grow so long and they grow straight through the pole that there's really no need. It's just providing that anchoring support for them, which is great. But a stake will do the same thing, and the leaves are still going to grow and mature as they climb. As long as they are supported, that vine, they're going to be encouraged to grow and climb up and get bigger leaves. So I highly recommend using a stake like I did and just Velcro the vine to the stake. That is going to be perfect. As far as feeding your albos, mine have taken really well to Osmocote slow release, and I have used it since about, I would say April of this year is when I started switching my plants over to slow release. I used a liquid dirt plant food before with all my plants, and I would say I have not gotten growth like I have these past several months. If you are using a liquid fertilizer, just make sure you're checking the dilution ratio according to that specific fertilizer. In winter, plants aren't necessarily growing like they are over summer. So in winter, you're especially going to have to cut back on that liquid fertilizer, especially if they're not in ideal conditions. And during winter, obviously they really aren't in ideal conditions. So you may want to cut back or dilute it a little bit more. And if they're not really constantly giving you new leaves, then I honestly would just not really fertilize until the spring season. But just get them in that environment, get them in good light, you know, good temperature, humidity, and they should continue to grow well for you. All of mine are constantly popping out new leaves. I have so much new growth on all these all the time. So just that light is key. And then with the slow release fertilizer, mine is good for 4 to 6 months. So I just sprinkle it into the soil on top, just kind of sprinkle it in, and I just water my plants like normal, and that's it. And those little pellets, they will slowly release over that time period. And so honestly, I'm only fertilizing my plants 3 times a year, and they're going to get that nutrition that they need all year round. I think your substrate and watering kind of goes hand in hand and plays a big role. Now, Monsteras do love a chunky mix, but if you personally don't like chunky mixes, if it dries out too fast for you and your needs, that's totally fine. You don't necessarily have to have like a super chunky aerated mix. I personally prefer it, and I feel like my plants have done better when they can have a less time in between like watering per se. So I prefer to water very heavily, let the entire root ball get a really thorough drink. So when I water these guys, I'm pouring water on top and letting it drip all the way through. The whole thing gets saturated, and they have that period where they can almost dry out again. I think that is key. And then soaking them again. So periods, just like how they are in the rainforest, if you think of how they are in their natural environment, when it rains, it pours per se. So you're getting a ton of rain at once, and then they go a period without some, and then it rains again. So I kind of simulate that with a chunky mix. So their roots will climb onto trees, anything surrounding the plant to help encourage it to climb onto the rainforest floor. And they're not really contained in that dense soil. So if anything, if you're just using a potting soil, I would at least at the bare minimum add some extra perlite just to help aerate that soil a little bit, because oxygen is very important to get down into the root system. and you don't want that root ball contained into just dense, soggy, wet soil all the time. No oxygen is getting through to the plant roots, and it's not healthy. So I highly encourage you to add at least a minimum of perlite. I like to add orchid bark, and I like to add charcoal in my mixes. I do have a video on my chunky mix, which I do love, and I also love Soils. I think it's a perfect chunky mix, and it does well for me and my environment and my watering routine, so I highly recommend them as well. And as far as watering go, like I said, I let mine mostly dry out, and it really honestly depends on your substrate and your environment. My plant room, it dries everything out in here so quickly, and it's over 80 degrees in here every day over the summer. So 80 plus degrees in a heavy aerated mix, my soils dry out within like 3 to 4 days. So it's just what I prefer, and I prefer to water my plants a little bit more heavily and kind of let them get that period where their roots get oxygen, they can breathe, and then they get watered again. So it's been doing well for me and my plants. My plants have taken off this year, and I think I'm just going to continue doing what I'm doing. And I haven't really had any issues with root rot actually in a long time. I used to overwater my plants. I didn't know anything about what a chunky mix was, and I got root rot a lot because my soil was wet, and me being the over caring plant person I am, I'm like wanting to water my plants a lot. So I would water on top of soil that was dense and already wet, and that was just a recipe for disaster. So I think your substrate is important. I highly encourage a chunky mix, but again, if you don't want to buy all the components to make a chunky mix, at least add some perlite in there. It's going to make a huge difference. And then I'll just touch on the environment. Monstera Albo, they don't really need super high humidity. I think humidity helps all tropical plants, of course. Anything less than 50 for me, I personally don't like. I think my plants have done and responded better to being in a higher humid environment. And I can say from my old house that I used to live in, and humidity being like less than 30% some days, I could tell my plants didn't like it. I would get more crispy tips, and it's just not ideal for these tropical plants. So anything less than 50 for me personally, I just don't like. So if you have a really dry environment, I would encourage getting a humidifier. It's really going to improve the health of your plants. I don't like cold temperature. I notice, so plants that aren't in my plant room, I have plants out of my plant room, they don't do as well. They don't get ideal light, and they don't get ideal temperature and warmth as plants in my plant room. So plants that I have out there, I can notice a difference in them. So if anything, I would make sure not to have them close to like air conditioning vents, drafty, cold windows. I think just backing them away a little bit temporarily over winter will help. I would just make sure not to let them get too cold. So ideally less than 65, I would stay away from 65 Fahrenheit. So I don't know what that is in Celsius, but anything less than that is kind of pushing it for some of these tropicals. My plant room does dip into the 60s occasionally, depending on the weather outside, but for the most part, they're not staying in that environment, so it's fine. And like in nature, you know, sometimes it dips down and it gets colder. For the most part, it stays above 70s in here most of the time, and they just prefer it. So that is it. I think that is all my care tips on a Monstera Albo. Definitely light is key. Make sure you fertilize when they're growing and get them supported, and make sure the soil can get some oxygen, and make sure you can give them a good solid drink. Mine are popping out leaves once like every 2 to 3 weeks. I'm getting a new leaf on some of these plants. And yeah, they're just really thriving in this environment and getting this good light. So those are my care tips. I hope they were helpful for you and you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, definitely let me know down below. I will have links to stuff that I use down below as well. I'll link my fertilizer, my clear pots that I use. I'll link Soils down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I will talk to you soon.